for having me. I really appreciate. I love to come on to things like this and talk about what I do because it's so important. So I'll tell you guys a little bit about what I do, and then I'll kind of jump into some info on the dark side of Botox. So I'm Gretch, and I'm an admin for the Botox Dysport side effects group, and that is a support group that is on Facebook. And I have been an admin there for a number of years. I started as a moderator and then jumped into the admin role. So there's a few components to what I do there. I primarily work on the education side of things. My formal background is in education. So I work on the education side of things where our goal is to sort of like bridge this gap that there is in this industry between patient and provider. And then I also work as an advocate. So I am working, especially in the last year and a half, directly one-on-one with people who have suffered from using Botox or other Botox products like Dysport, Xeomin, Jeuveau, Daxxify. These are all the same, basically the same active neurotoxic protein, but they are just called different things. And I'll talk about a little bit more about that in a second. So I do that. And then I also now work on the awareness side of things. So I'm running an Instagram page called Never Tox, which is how you guys found me, I believe. And so there, my goal is to either find people who are suffering from this toxin or from Botox, and they haven't like been able to connect the dots between what they're experiencing in their body to actually being from the product itself. And then also my goal is to find people who are considering using Botox and to, again, bridge that gap between the information that they're being given from their provider versus what is actually really happening to people out there. Because we are finding that just the overall narrative in the industry is that Botox is safe. And I'm sure that's probably what you guys have all heard as well, is that, you know, there's very little concern with using this product, that millions of injections are done every year and, you know, people aren't suffering. But the problem is that couldn't be further from the truth. Our support group has 25,000 people currently, and we are growing at a tremendously quick rate. So I got into this actually because my sister suffered greatly from one set of Botox injections back in 2016. And she and I together sort of jumped onto this train to understand what was happening in her body. So that's kind of how I originally got into this. Okay, so to tell you a little bit about the dark side. So I could go on and on for hours about this, literally. I have studied it so intensely. And then, of course, working one-on-one with sufferers, I have really come to understand exactly why botulinum toxin is dangerous to our body. So first of all, botulinum toxin is the active ingredient that you will find in Botox, Dysport, Xeomin, Jeuveau, and then the new peptide formula that was just released like 3 months ago called Daxxify. And this is the same neurotoxic protein, botulinum toxin A, that is responsible for causing human botulism. And so when we use it cosmetically or we use it therapeutically, it is a very small dose typically, but the problem is that it can still cause problems in the body. And so because of that, this product contains what is called a black box warning label. And that is the strictest labeling that regulating bodies put on a product in order to basically warn the patient or the public that if you use this, it could have fatal consequences. It could be disabling to your body, or any number of things could happen. And then specifically with Botox, if you look through the medication guide, it lists botulism as a consequence of using this product. So the people that I work with are people who have either had a systemic reaction to it. So what that means is either they've gone through a severe allergic reaction to it, or their body has reacted systemically, so they have an immune response to it, or they have all of these symptoms in their body that they didn't have prior to using the product. And then we have a whole group of people who actually have the clinical signs of botulism, which is what had happened to my sister. So that is one thing that a lot of people don't realize, is that Botox carries this black box warning label. So I always start with that right from the very beginning. Okay, and so let's talk a little bit also about another concern with this neurotoxic protein, is that it actually has the ability to cross the BBB, or the blood-brain barrier. So when this product was first approved, Botox was the first one that went through back in 1989, long time ago. It was thought that this neurotoxic protein would stay in the muscle, that it couldn't move outside of the muscle group in which it was put into. But then they found out a little bit later in the early 2000s that that just simply was not the case. So in 2009, they launched that black box warning label after a slew of issues happened for people and major litigation and these kinds of things against the manufacturer, because people, either it was fatal or people were getting really, really sick from it. And the main reason why is because of this crossover into the BBB. So that's another thing that can happen. So when this neurotoxic protein goes south in the body, it goes really south, and a lot of things can happen that are very dangerous. Okay, and then let's talk a little bit then about how the toxin spreads. So I get this question all the time. Well, how does this happen? So the thing is, in anybody's body, we can't say for sure exactly what happened, right? Because there's several modes of which this can happen. One being it can cross the BBB, or it can just leak out of the muscle. So any of this toxin, because it is so lethal just based on what it is, okay, this neurotoxic protein, botulinum toxin A, it's the world's most lethal neurotoxin. Any little bit or a tiny amount of it leaking outside that muscle can then be absorbed into the bloodstream. It can travel along the central nervous system pathways and then cause this disease in the body. And so we always tell people, every time you use this product, that is a risk that you are assuming. And so there's this narrative behind this product saying that it's completely safe. But the problem is, if your muscle can't hold on to this toxin, because sometimes the toxin just is overloaded in there. So if you've had many injections, the muscle just can't hold it, right? Or for other anatomical reasons, like let's say you've had a past surgery, or you've injured yourself to that muscle in some way, that's another reason why maybe it wouldn't hold on to the toxin. So there's just a number of reasons. And then of course, everybody's body is so different, right? We have different genetic makeups. We are just so very different in how we react to things. And so I'm telling you all this because I want people to understand that nobody knows what camp you're going to be in. You could be someone that could have several successful, anti-wrinkle or Botox injections and be fine. Or you could be someone who gets sick immediately, like my sister. She had one time about 30 units to her glabellar complex and a little bit up in her forehead here. And then within 5 days, she had clinical signs of botulism. And that caused her to be ill for many months, very seriously. And then those symptoms carried on for years. So I don't say this to frighten people. I just say this because this is the real information that people have a right to understand. Because what we're learning is that people are just not understanding, that informed consent you mentioned in the beginning. They're just not understanding that this can happen to them should they embark on it. And we have had many people, by the way, in our group. So there's thousands of people in our group that have had many treatments. They've had 5, 6, 7, some people 20 treatments of Botox, and they've been fine. And then all of a sudden, on their 20th treatment, they have all the signs of botulism and they're very, very sick. So it's just so important that people have this informed consent, because when they go and they sit down at the provider's office, oftentimes they're just given, a piece of paper that has kind of a summed up version of that black box warning label there. And they're not really internalizing it, or they're not reading it thoroughly, or they're not consulting with the provider enough to know that this is in fact a risk and why that labeling exists. So wanted to definitely touch on that. Okay, and here's another really good one. The more somebody uses these products, okay, Botox, it causes muscle atrophy. So the product is actually designed to paralyze the muscle. So you'll hear people say, oh, it's fine, it wears off. Okay, that may be true, but I don't think people are understanding exactly what is happening in the body. So you inject this neurotoxic protein and it basically disrupts the chemical messaging system in the nerves. So our nerves have a messaging system where they release a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. And that neurotransmitter is what tells your muscles to contract. So when you inject this neurotoxic protein there, it basically inhibits that function to the point then where it paralyzes the muscle, and the muscle is no longer able to move, and then that nerve dies. So when muscle movement then is restored again to the face or to that muscle group, or any muscle group that you have it in your body, it is because the body went through a restorative process to sprout and grow new nerves in that are then capable of releasing that neurotransmitter. And that does not happen for every single person every single time. So this is where we see, physical disfigurement happen on the face, or the severe muscle atrophy or muscle wasting as a side effect of using those injections multiple times, because at some point, it seems for most people, the body is just unable to do that restorative process anymore. And then, of course, because now we have this severe muscle atrophy, if that person goes in and gets the product again, they are at an enhanced risk of having it spread to unintended areas. So it's like this product kind of, in a way, causes its own counterindication, which I think is really important for people to understand. On the last page of the medication guide, it says muscle atrophy is a counterindication for using Botox. So I always bring that up as well, because I think it is so important. And then also, anyone out there that maybe is considering using Botox, there is a whole long list of other counterindications, whether it be medications that you're taking or autoimmune disorders or conditions that you have, all of these things that people really need to be thinking about. Do I have this condition? Is this something that runs in my family? And they need to be really consulting with their provider first to make sure that they don't have anything on that list. Now, of course, I am from the camp that nobody should use botulinum toxin, and I base that from a lethality standpoint, because it is, by definition, the world's most lethal neurotoxic protein. You cannot find anything more lethal. It is so lethal that it has to be dosed in nanograms, and a nanogram is 1/1,000,000th of 1 milligram. So this is such a teeny tiny amount because it is so lethal. So for me, I just don't think it's worth the risk based on lethality alone. I don't know. I don't want to go too long. Just cut me off if I start, or if you have any questions, feel free to jump in.
I wanted to know, does anybody have any questions for her while she's here? Some of the things that I've found that were so interesting to me was the fact that I did think it was a wear off thing. I didn't think it was I'm basically killing the nerves. So, it's not really wearing off. It's just destroying tissue. So I found that to be really interesting. I also find it interesting that, along the lines of what we were talking about earlier, is that now they're saying that you can have organic products.
That goes back to what we were talking about with marketing. Like, just because it's organic or all natural or whatever other nonsense that they put on it doesn't mean it's not extremely toxic.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I have spent a lot of time, I worked in the beauty industry for a number of years, and so I'm not new to the industry, but I have also spent a lot of time trying to understand, how is it that we got to this narrative that Botox is completely safe? Or you'll actually hear providers say that it's not toxic, when that couldn't be. I mean, it's just it's completely false. Mm-hmm. Or that it's organic. And you're right. At the end of the day, these are marketing techniques that are designed to drive sales. And if you spend any length of time actually studying the product and reading the studies, you'll see that that's exactly what it is. It falls back to marketing, and it's really unfortunate. And it is a really big dark side of this industry, because people, this product preys on our insecurities, right? And we are invested in the outcome of how it's going to make us feel. So we sort of gloss over the serious part of it, and we believe the narratives or the marketing tactics instead, and it's a big concern.
Well, perfect.
I know,
that was so great.
That was really thank you so much. I mean, you did a much better job than my 4 slides I had, that I was going to introduce that to everybody. But and so
I really
appreciate it.